At home that night, after dinner, Maushumi hunts among the shelves in the living room she and Nikhil share. Their books have merged since they've gotten married. Nikhil had unpacked them all, and nothing is where she expects it to be. Her eyes pass over stacks of Nikhil's design magazines, thick books on Gropius and Le Corbusier. Nikhil, bent over a blueprint at the dining table, asks what she's looking for. Stendhal, she tells him. It's not a lie. An old modern library edition of The Red and the Black in English, inscribed to mouse. Love, Dimitri, he had written. It was the one book he had inscribed to her. Back then, it was the closest thing she had ever had to a love letter. For months she had slept with the book under her pillow, and later slipped it between her mattress and box spring. Somehow she managed to hold on to it for years. It's moved with her from Providence to Paris to New York, a secret talisman on her shelves that she would glance at now and again, still faintly flattered by his peculiar pursuit of her, and always faintly curious as to what had become of him. But now that she's desperate to locate the book, she's convinced that it won't be in the apartment, that maybe Graham had taken it by mistake when he had moved out of their place on York Avenue, or that it's in the basement of her parents' house, in one of the boxes she had shipped there a few years ago. When her shelves were getting too full, she doesn't remember packing it from her old apartment, doesn't remember unpacking it when she and Nikhil moved in together. She wishes she could ask Nikhil if he has seen it. A small, green, cloth-bound book, missing its dust jacket. The title embossed in a rectangle of black on the spine. And then, suddenly, she sees it herself, sitting in plain view on a shelf she had scanned a minute ago. She opens the book, sees the modern library emblem, the dashing, naked, torch-bearing figure. She sees the inscription, the force of the ballpoint pen he had used slightly crimping on the other side of the page. She had abandoned the novel after the second chapter. Her place is still marked by a yellowing receipt for shampoo. By now, she has read the book in French 3 times. She finishes Scott Moncrief's English translation within days, reading it at her desk in the department and in her carrel in the library. In evenings, at home, she reads it in bed until Nikhil comes in to join her. Then she puts it away and opens something else. She calls him the following week. By then, she has dug up the postcards, saved in an unsealed, unmarked manila envelope in the box where she keeps her tax returns, and reads them, too, amazed that his words, the sight of his handwriting, still manage to discombobulate her. She tells herself she is calling on an old friend. She tells herself that the coincidence of finding his resume of stumbling upon him in this way is too great that anyone in her position would pick up the phone and call. She tells herself he could be very well married, as she is. Perhaps all four of them will go out to dinner, become great friends. Still, she doesn't tell Nikhil about the resume. One night in her office, after 7 o'clock, when only a janitor roams the halls, after a few sips from the small bottle of Maker's Mark she has stashed at the back of her file cabinet, she calls. A night Nikhil thinks she's working on revisions for an article from PMLA. She dials the number, listens as it rings 4 times. She wonders if he'll even remember her. Her heart races. Her finger moves to the cradle, ready to press down. Hello? It's his voice. Hi, Dimitri? Speaking. Who's this? She pauses. She can still hang up if she wants. It's Mouse. They begin seeing each other Mondays and Wednesdays after she teaches her class. She takes the train uptown and they meet at his apartment, where lunch is waiting. The meals are ambitious. Poached fish, creamy potato gratins, golden puffed chickens, roasted with whole lemons in their cavities. There is always a bottle of wine. They sit at a table with his books and papers and laptop pushed to one side. They listen to WQXR, drink coffee and cognac, and smoke a cigarette afterward. Only then does he touch her. Sunlight streams through the large, dirty windows into the shabby, pre-war apartment. There are 2 spacious rooms, flaking plaster walls, scuffed parquet floors, towering stacks of boxes he has not yet bothered to unpack. The bed, a brand new mattress and box spring on wheels, is never made. After sex, they are always amazed to discover that the bed has moved several inches away from the wall, pushing up against the bureau on the other side of the room. She likes the way he looks at her when their limbs are still entangled together, out of breath as if he had been chasing her, his expression anxious before relaxing into a smile. Some grey has come into Dimitri's hair and chest, some lines around the mouth and eyes. He is heavier than before, his stomach undeniably wide, so that his thin legs appear slightly comic. He recently turned 39. He has not been married. He does not seem very desperate to be employed. He spends his days cooking meals, reading, listening to classical music. She gathers that he has inherited some money from his grandmother. The first time they met, the day after she called him, at the bar of a crowded Italian restaurant near NYU, they had not been able to stop staring at each other, not been able to stop talking about the resume, and the uncanny way it had fallen into Marshumi's hands. He had moved to New York only a month ago, had tried to look her up, but the phone is still listed under Nikhil's last name. It didn't matter, they agreed. It was better this way. They drank glasses of Prosecco. She agreed to an early dinner with Dmitri that night, sitting at the bar of the restaurant, for the Prosecco had gone quickly to their heads. He had ordered a salad topped with warm lamb's tongue, a poached egg, and pecorino cheese, something she swore she would not touch, but ended up eating the better part of. Afterward, she had gone into Balducci's to buy the pasta and ready-made vodka sauce she would have at home with Nikhil. On Mondays and Wednesdays, no one knew where she is. There are no Bengali fruit sellers to greet her on the walk from Dimitri's subway stop. No neighbors to recognize her once she turns into Dimitri's block. It reminds her of living in Paris. A few hours at Dimitri's, she is inaccessible, anonymous. Dmitri is not terribly curious about Nikhil, does not ask her his name. He expresses no jealousy. When she told him in the Italian restaurant that she was married, his expression had not changed. He regards their time together as perfectly normal, as destined, and she begins to see how easy it is. Maushumi refers to Nikhil in conversation as my husband. My husband and I have a dinner to go to next Thursday. My husband's given me this cold. At home, Nikhil suspects nothing. As usual, they have dinner, talk of their days. They clean up the kitchen together, then sit on the sofa and watch television while she corrects her quizzes, students' quizzes and exercises. During the 11 o'clock news, they have bowls of Ben & Jerry's, then brush their teeth. As usual, they get into bed, kiss, then slowly they turn away from each other in order to stretch comfortably into sleep. Only Maushumi stays awake. Each Monday and Wednesday night, she fears that he will sense something, that he will put his arms around her and instantly know. She stays awake for hours after they have turned out the lights, prepared to answer him, prepared to lie to his face. She had gone shopping, she would tell him, if he were to ask. For in fact, she had done this on her way home that first Monday, halting her journey back from Dimitri's in midstream, getting out of the subway at 72nd Street before continuing downtown, stopping in a store she had never been in, buying a pair of the most ordinary-looking black shoes. One night it's worse than usual. It's 3 o'clock, then 4. Construction work has been taking place for the past few nights on their street. Giant bins of rubble and concrete are moved and crushed, and Maushumi feels angry at Nikhil for being able to sleep through it. She's tempted to get up, pour herself a drink, take a bath, anything, but fatigue keeps her in bed. She watches the shadows that the passing traffic throws onto their ceiling, listens to a truck wailing in the distance like a solitary nocturnal beast. She is convinced she will be up to see the sunrise, but somehow she falls asleep again. She is woken just after dawn by the sound of rain beating against the bedroom window, pelting it with such ferocity that she almost expects the glass to shatter. She has a splitting headache. She gets out of bed and parts the curtains, then returns to bed and shakes Nikhil awake. "Look," she says, pointing at the rain as if it were something truly extraordinary. Nikhil obliges, fully asleep, sits upright, then closes his eyes again. At 7:30 she gets out of bed. The morning sky is clear. She walks out of the bedroom and sees that rain has leaked through the roof, left an unsightly yellow patch on the ceiling and puddles in the apartment. One in the bathroom, another in the front hall. The sill of a window left open in the living room is soaked and streaked with mud, as are the bills and books and papers piled on it. The sight of it makes her weep. At the same time, she's thankful that there's something tangible for her to be upset about. "Why are you crying?" Nikhil asks, squinting at her in his pajamas. "There are cracks in the ceiling," she says. Nikhil looks up. "They're not too bad. I'll call the super." "The rainwater came right through the roof." "What rain?" "Don't you remember? It was pouring rain at dawn. It was incredible. I woke you." But Nikhil doesn't remember a thing. A month of Mondays and Wednesdays passes. She begins to see him on Fridays as well. One Friday, she finds herself alone in Dimitri's apartment. He has gone out as soon as she arrives to buy a stick of butter for a white sauce he is making to pour over trout. Bartok plays on the stereo, expensive components scattered on the floor. She watches him from the window walking down the block, a small, balding, unemployed, middle-aged man who is enabling her to wreck her marriage. She wonders if she is the only woman in her family ever to have betrayed her husband, to have been unfaithful. This is what upsets her the most to admit, that the affair causes her to feel strangely at peace, the complication of it calming her, structuring her day. After the first time, washing up in the bathroom, she had been horrified by what she had done, at the sight of her clothes scattered throughout the 2 rooms. Before leaving, she had combed her hair in the bathroom mirror, the only one in the apartment. She had kept her head bent low, glancing up only briefly at the end. When she did, she saw that it was one of those mirrors that was, for some reason, particularly flattering, due to some trick of the light or the quality of the grass, causing her skin to glow. There is nothing on Dimitri's walls. He is still living out of a series of mammoth duffel bags. She is glad not to be able to picture his life in all its detail, its mess. The only things he has set up are the kitchen, the stereo components, and some of his books. Each time she visits, there are modest signs of progress. She wanders around his living room, looking at the books he is beginning to organize on his plywood shelves. Apart from all the German, their personal libraries are similar. There is the same lime green spine of the Princeton Encyclopedia of Poetry and Poetics, the same edition of Mimesis, the same boxed set of Proust. She pulls out an oversized volume of photographs of Paris by Atget. She sits on an armchair, Dimitri's only piece of living room furniture. It was here that she had sat the first time she had visited, and he had stood behind her, massaging a spot on her shoulder, arousing her until she stood up, and they walked together to the bed. She opens up the book to regard the streets and the landmarks she once knew. She thinks of her wasted fellowship. A large square of sunlight appears on the floor. The sun is directly behind her, and the shadow of her head spreads across the thick silken pages. A few strands of her hair, strangely magnified, quivering, as if viewed through a microscope. She leans back her head, closes her eyes. When she opens them, a moment later, the sun has slipped away, a lone sliver of it now diminishing into the floorboards, like the gradual closing of a curtain, causing the stark white pages of the book to turn grey. She hears Dimitri's footsteps on the stairs, then the clean sound of his key in the lock, slicing sharply into the apartment. She gets up to put the book away, searching for the gap in which it had stood.